Please join me for a prayerful meditation. Close your eyes, if you would, and imagine yourselves at a tree. Maybe it's a redwood, maybe an oak tree, but it's sturdy and full of life. In a wooded area full of trees at its darkest, this tree called to you because it was vibrant, lush. You begin to climb the tree. You sit on the first branch and notice something about the forest you hadn't seen before. Something beautiful. You make your way up to the next branch, and suddenly you see a field filled with people playing. It's a post-pandemic world, so you aren't panicked. It's a game you've never seen before, but it looks fun. You climb to the third branch and stop. You notice the air is clean. You see strangers and friends off in the distance. You can't make out what they're doing, but you imagine it anyway. You imagine joining them. Finally, you make your way to the top of the tree and you see the world before you. You can't see specifics, so building on the beauty you saw along the way, you imagine a world where everyone is treated with compassion, a world made possible by so many little steps along the way, so many branches. You make your way back down and reflect on the world you imagined. And you examine that first branch, remembering that very first step was the hardest. As you leave, you hear a voice that says, "Keep on climbing," and return to the dark woods with a smile and an idea. An idea only you know, but one that will inspire the year ahead. Run with it, friends. Blessed be, and amen. "2020 is officially behind us. Most people I know are saying good riddance. I probably would be too if not for the birth of my daughter. It was a hard year, and we are so ready for change. I want to preach that we're in a new phase, a new time, a new hope. But an arbitrary date change sadly doesn't make that so. Only we can do that. When I was a child, I loved to imagine myself as a superhero who would save the world. Granted, this is common for kids to imagine since it's all over our culture, but I loved the idea of saving people. The powers were less appealing than the saving. As an adult, I'd like to think I've evolved from an instinct to save to an instinct to help. But if we're being honest, we all struggle with the desire to do the healing for others because presence can honestly be harder than a dramatic rescue. Part of what feels so daunting about this year is that it feels like we actually need to be rescued. Rescued from a pandemic, rescued from inequality, rescued from racism, rescued from food insecurity, rescued from corruption, rescued from greed, rescued from a healthcare system that was designed to put profits ahead of people. And the hero complex in me wants to do the rescuing. But the problem with the rescue analogy is that it's usually a short-lived event, and none of these issues will go away quickly. Like me, Tally also loves to play superhero. But when she's playing Super Tally, The rescue itself is never all that dramatic, and I think there's something to it. No matter the story that goes behind the rescue itself looks the same. Every rescue ends in a hug. The end of every story is that we're together for it. And here at church, we're going to need to be together, supporting and loving each other through everything that comes next. Because we know the painful part of this journey is far from over, and it does feel fatalistic at times. Approaching 350,000 deaths from COVID-19, and we had record air travel around the country over Christmas. I know that I struggle at times with the feeling that our destiny is predetermined, that it's going to get worse. Our country will continue to show a staggering lack of compassion. Our healthcare system will be so profoundly overwhelmed. And even when the dust settles, as a nation, we will have learned very little. Even if it goes against every fiber of my Unitarian Universalist faith and being, it's hard not to look down a treacherous road that seems unavoidable. That's why the theme of imagination comes at such a vital time in our lives. Because changing the course and building a different post-pandemic society that's going to look and feel very different from anything we've experienced. And I keep asking, how are we going to overcome these divides? How are we going to overcome the exhaustion? Because bettering the world takes so much more work than we have to give. Listening to the doctors and nurses who have never been working harder, they tell stories of how when the pandemic first appeared in March, for a month they would receive cheers of applause, donations of food for all those people pulling extra shifts, gratitude from the scared masses that saw them as heroes. 9 months in, the cheers have stopped. The people have stopped many of the precautions they originally practiced, and medical professionals are more likely to get yelled at about wait times. Acute compassion is natural. Chronic empathy is a lot harder. In many ways, I feel like we need to go back to school to relearn empathy and imagination. Because there's so much of our childhood development that we simply let fade away. It breaks my heart that Tally has not been getting to use her imagination with others her age. But watching the way that she plays, throwing herself into the impossible for the joy of it, and taking it seriously, I realized how much we would benefit from play, even playing pretend, as a way to overcome the challenges we face. For young children, it's been scientifically shown that play-based learning instills empathy, problem-solving, imagination, and collaboration. But I think it does for adults too. And we just aren't as practiced in play-based learning. 10 years ago, I had a very different perspective about capitalism than I do now. And one of the most influential and informative moments in my personal process was a game. The game begins simply as a trading game, where we are ultimately divided into groups based on how well we traded with our chips. The group with the most chips, much smaller than the group with the least, little by little gains authority over the rules of the trading, over the facilitators of the game, and eventually it starts to replicate a tiered society like the one that we live in. It was so simple. So little was actually at stake. But I remember the feeling that our group of people with so little power needed to band together, needed to fight, needed to find another way. We went on strike. We sang. We developed nonviolent protests. The other side even tried to kidnap the person who had become the leader of our resistance. And that was the point at which the facilitators broke character and stopped us. We had taken the game so seriously that it really and truly felt like we were fighting for our world, fighting for real power. But that was the point. It was role playing, and we didn't even know it until the facilitators stopped the game. But that was the day that I watched dear, compassionate friends make terribly mean decisions because of the power they were given, and joined with other friends in debating violent versus nonviolent resistance. No amount of study could have prepared me for how much a game would change my perspective. But it did. And I think that I got so profoundly attached to our goals and our hopes, not just because we were being oppressed in this simulation, but because we'd found joy in fighting it together in the little community that we formed. But it taught me another valuable lesson. It's a lot easier to sustain anger and fear than it is to sustain compassion. Without joy and playfulness, compassion is simply too exhausting to sustain. Eventually, it fades into resentment. For sustained compassion and justice, in order for us to build towards something that is utterly different from the world we currently live in, joy is required. And play is a critical way that we get there. So, what if we changed our frame towards justice making and empathy? What if instead of seeing it as work, we see it as play? Because I don't think we can imagine a future that we truly want to see without a sense of true joy in the potential. And play doesn't mean that we take the efforts any less seriously. There's a reason why children's shows like Sesame Street use music and fun to teach valuable lessons that better children's lives. Because fun is sustainable. Joy is more sustainable than sadness. And we've felt a lot of sadness in the past year. So maybe change starts with play. Imagining that we live in a just society, imagining what it looks like, and believing in the impossible. Believing that we can all be on the same page about caring for each other. Our first principle of the inherent worth and dignity of all people means that we are worthy of all of it. Worthy of respect, worthy of love, and worthy of joy. And I think after the year that we've had, in order to actually make a difference, justice needs not to be considered work because we are too tired for work. It will fizzle out because we need to replenish. But if it's part of our very essence, part of who we are, part of how we play and express love, that has a chance of going deeper into our broader society. Because then it will be revitalizing. We have a lot of play ahead of us and a lot of imagining to do. Because if there's one thing that children teach us, it's that we adults put our values on the wrong industries. And the pandemic has certainly taught us more about the services that are essential. Normal is not something we can go back to. We will be called to restructure our society when the dust settles. And when we do, it will be based on what we value. And that is why we play, to share our values and build them together. I know that playing will take getting used to for many of you, but it's worth it. The beauty of play is that there's no wrong way to do it. So, friends, let's experiment with our imagination and our play, because an impossible world is waiting for us to believe in it, and only we can play our way there. Blessed be, and amen.